I do. I should, by way of quick preamble, point out that I used to spend a lot of time with you all on the Hill in the policy domains of energy, and I spent a lot of my life in the engineering and physics of energy in its broadest sense. By that I mean everything that has to do with both the philosophy of energy, if you like, and the political realities of dealing with it. So I write about energy, and I'll talk about from a macro perspective. But in my day-to-day living these days, I'm a venture capitalist. So what I'm interested in is the part of the energy equation that relates to people that are attempting to make money. And one of the derivative outcomes of making money is you create jobs. And just as my own aside about the job issue, I'll give you an observation and a fact that's useful in energy. But first, I don't know any business that is created except the government with the purpose of creating jobs. People who start businesses create a business because they have an idea, they have passion. It's the hardest thing I find as a venture guy is to find the people, not the technologies. And their goal is to make money, because money is the measure of a successful business. Derivatively, you create jobs. It's just how it works, and it's how it's worked for a long time. The Soviet Empire tried it the other way. It took a while to unwind and figure out that it doesn't work so well, but you know, there's a certain inertia to systems. The other useful fact, and sort of follow up with Lou about, I wrote a piece called 40 Acres and a Mule for energy policy. It's the same idea. You could fully employ people in the energy sector by giving everybody 40 acres and a mule. You can supply your own energy and your own food, and there's actually enough land to do that still in America. There's not that many people, it's a lot of acres. That's not what we really want. 5% of the American workforce are employed in the business of making energy in one way, shape, or form. All aspects of energy technology, energy production. 95% of people who are employed in businesses that consume energy. That's a good thing, I would propose. But I don't think policies that reverse that are particularly productive for America or for the world. And the world has been chasing that paradigm for about 10,000 years. It's what we want to do. Used to be we all employed in growing food, which is another form of energy. Now we employ about 3% of the population in all of its various manifestations in producing food. So I'm going to talk about paradigms, because paradigms matter. I mean, all of you probably doubtless read Kuhn's book about paradigms. The paradigms are how you think about a problem. The paradigm problem we have with energy, and I'll talk about why energy policy has failed, but it's failing now because the paradigm we're essentially operating under implicitly or explicitly is one of limits and shortages. What you just heard in these two slides today, I'm PowerPoint free, so you don't see. I apologize for being PowerPoint free, but I swore off PowerPoints having been subjected to them, and when I see business presentations as a venture guy, I have a PowerPoint exclusion policy. I don't take presentations from prospective investors in PowerPoint. They have to explain it to me. And then I want to see the financials, because I digress. So paradigms matter. So the paradigm of, we have a limit. We have a shortage of energy. That's been the paradigm, limits, peaks. You saw the data. We're living in this data. The paradigm is wrong. We're in an era of energy abundance. We're awash in energy. We're awash in energy opportunities. In North America, as the world is, we're drowning in fuels of all kinds of options. There's no shortage problem. There's no peak problem. If there is a peak, if there were ever to be a peak, it's so far off in the future, it's not only irrelevant to you and me, it's certainly irrelevant on the timelines of politicians who are interested in being reelected, I assure you. There's nothing happening in Ohio about shortages of oil. They're going to be drowning in oil shortly from the Utica Shale to this point. Production is beginning, and it's astounding. There are going to be lots of Ohio billionaires, believe it or not. There's going to be a Ferrari dealership in Columbus in the next 5 years because of oil. So the paradigm's wrong. And when you get paradigms wrong, it's a problem. And so let me talk about three things of why energy policy fails, and they're all sort of paradigmatic things. The first problem we've got is that energy is too broad a subject to have a policy. So you can't have one. By way of example, we've given up on forging an industrial policy. Remember, if you read your history, some of you may actually remember, America and the world, everybody was trying to create an industrial policy. The Soviet Empire had an industrial policy. America tried to, it gave up because it was too big. It's too broad a thing. Well, industrial policy is actually pretty narrow compared to energy policy. Energy policy is about everything. It's about industry, it's about agriculture, it's about buildings, it's about telecommunications, it's about transportation. It's about energy is everything. So DOE is not the Department of Energy, should be called the Department of Everything. And of course, regulators salivate over the opportunity to be involved in the Department of Everything, so I understand, I get the inertia why it survives as an entity. I worked in the Reagan White House Science Office, and you all may recall that one of the goals we were told we had was to dismantle the Department of Everything. Obviously, I failed. I was on the task force that was supposed to do that, and it was a terrific education into the dispersal of federal and congressional largesse. No agency puts more money in more states than the Department of Energy. It beats the Department of Defense hands down. So it's pretty tough to get anybody on the other side of the aisle to support that strategy of dismantling that sugar daddy. So it's too broad. It simply is. It defies focus, and it defies simplistic aphorisms like, let's do an Apollo program for a new energy technology. Please. It's simplistic is a kind observation about that kind of nonsense. The Apollo program was marvelous. The perspicacious engineers did something incredible. They put a man on the moon and brought him home. That was their mission. Energy policy is like putting everybody on the moon. That's the difference. And if you think in those terms, you'll understand why it's idiotic to have Apollo programs or Manhattan projects to solve the energy problem. First, there's no problem. We've got too much of it. That's not the problem. Secondly, it can't be, whatever it is, it can't be solved that way. It's a second paradigm problem is that we have two energy economies. So energy is broad, but there's actually a way to bifurcate the energy issue in this economy, but globally. It's not one energy economy. We have the liquid fuels and transportation economy, which is, transportation is 99% propelled by liquid fuels, almost entirely oil. There's a tiny amount, by virtue of congressional fiat, of non-oil, hopeful drop-in molecule equivalent to oil stuff, ethanol, and some biodiesel. But it's all oil, globally. The rest of the economy is almost all electricity. So it's a rule of thirds. A third of the energy economy is in transportation, it's all oil. 2/3 of the energy economy is in non-oil. And of that 2/3, 2/3 of that is all electricity. And the electric share of that is rising continuously. It has for centuries, since Edison and Tesla, and it's still rising. It's rising in every state, in every country, and everywhere. The share of electricity in the non-transportation economy keeps rising. They are distinctly different economies. They're disconnected economies in the sense of energy. And even if people's goals, wishes, and I agree with Lou about where electric cars are going, not where electrification is going, but electric cars for sure. Even if the most optimistic goals for electric transportation are achieved, even if the wildly enthusiastic mouth breathers get their wish, it will still be a 98% liquid fuel oil-fired economy for transportation in another 5 or 10 years. Here's an economic fact for you about those two economies. The part of our GDP that's tied up with transportation, that share of moving things and people, is now smaller than the part of our GDP that moves data. Which do you think is growing faster? So we have a larger share of our GDP involved in all aspects of creating and moving data. And by that I include manufacturing cars and planes and trains, not just I'm talking about all the activities associated with moving stuff versus moving data. Moving data is a bigger part of our economy and growing rapidly. If you conflate these two things, you create problems. So a BTU is not a BTU. The two energy economies have very different characteristics in physics. They have different characteristics in economics. They have different velocities. Electricity moves at the speed of light. Oil doesn't. Oil is easy to store. Electricity is not. Oil has limited uses that are extraordinarily high value. Electricity has unlimited uses that are even higher value. But they aren't connected. You don't fly airplanes on batteries. You can fly batteries in airplanes. And a battery that's suitable for flying an airplane is a weapon, not a battery. Those kinds of energy densities are achievable in electrochemistry. They're not very achievable in physical chemistry except as weapons. So it's the second problem is that we lump it. EIA does that. We just count BTUs or quads or barrels of oil as equivalent. It's a meaningless tracking metric. It illuminates nothing. And in fact, disguises important trends like those Lou pointed out with respect to the liquid infrastructure of the economy, which is vital. Obviously, we want to keep moving stuff around. We want to move ourselves. We want to move the iPhones we buy.
But we don't power the iPhones with gasoline, and we don't move airplanes and cars with what iPhones run on.